Hey everybody, it's Shadow Kage coming at you in our YouTube video. In today's YouTube video, we're going to talk about my rankings of the Saga and the Dragon Ball Z specifically. Yeah, so if you guys like what I'm going to say, hit the like button. If you want to hear more about my opinions in anime, you can hit the subscribe button and also hit the notifications bell because that'll help to keep you updated on my content as it comes out and all that sort of stuff. Also, if you guys disagree with me or you agree, you guys can comment in the comment description about what you disagree with what you agree with, where you guys think I'm a total buffoon. You guys can say all that sort of stuff in the comments. It's free. Help me get better at this. Let's build a community. You can have a lot of fun. Maybe not so much fun for me sometimes, and you guys, do your criticisms, but anyways, enough of that. Let's move on to my ranking. So some of my ranking criteria I had are how much it builds on the series, how much it sets up for the series, on how the story seems to fit in the rest of the context of the story, how the story's been unfolding slowly, what it adds, these are all sorts of things I'm going to that I use when ranking. I have a bunch of things. I'm gonna probably list off a bunch of things I liked about them. There's probably a few things I didn't like in the lists, and I'll probably talk about a bunch of that stuff. We'll go from there. Okay, starting off at number 5, it's the Majin Buu Saga. To me, really, the Majin Buu Saga kind of came out of nowhere. Like, there was no build up to it. There was no seeming reason for it. Buu was never really foreshadowed the same way like the androids kind of were, or how Frieza was, or the Saiyan. Even the Saiyans kind of came out of nowhere. But that was also kind of an idea that people had, that someone was up with Goku with his tail and stuff. Even in a lot of ways, that was still kind of foreshadowed. But that's also kind of the beginning, so you kind of have to just got to build onto stuff. So it did give us some cool ideas though, like in fusions with Vegito and Vegito and Gotenks. These are all real cool things that they added to the story. They all came from the Buu Saga, with Metamoran fusion, the fusion dance, and with the Potara fusion. These are all things that they added. Super Saiyan 3, which kind of really came out of nowhere. Did absolutely nothing. We've got Majin Vegeta, one of my all-time favorite versions of Vegeta. We got the awesome fight between Majin Vegeta and Goku and Super Saiyan 2. That was a great fight. A lot of cool techniques. Majin Vegeta's sacrifice, the real kind of catalyst to his change that we see later on into Super and to some extent in Daima. These are all things you see that are kind of really put in place with that Majin Vegeta sacrifice and stuff. But some of the negatives are, it's really all over the place. There's no real through line through the whole thing. You start off at a tournament, which is, hey, that's kind of gets back to the roots of Dragon Ball, but it kind of goes all nowhere. Then all of a sudden you add some extra Kais that we've never heard of in there, injected to this evil that's been hiding on the planet for millennia. I still feel like they brought Goku back for far too quickly. I think having off-screen 7 years, I think that really does a disservice to Goku's sacrifice too. From the Cell Saga, we'll talk about that later. But the purification of Evil Buu and the reincarnation of Oob was kind of a cool, different way of dealing with the sacrifice, dealing with how to deal with a villain. That was a new thing for Dragon Ball. It was kind of cool. I think overall, with the Buu Saga, I'd probably give it a solid 5 out of 10. Yeah, because there's a lot of negatives, a lot of positives. There's a lot of characters that just don't really do much in the whole saga. We got Piccolo not doing much. We got Krillin not doing much. We got really everybody that's not a Saiyan not really doing much at all. Like even Goten and Trunks don't do much. Even when their fusion of Gotenks unlocking Super Saiyan 3 is probably their biggest accomplishment. And in all honesty, it's not that big of one. It's not really significant in any real way, because even later on it just gets used as a gag. So, that's kind of the way I look at that. So, okay, we're going to move on. We're going to move on to my number 4 pick, the Android Saga. Yeah, I split the Android Saga and the Cell Saga up because to me they feel inherently like two different arcs. Starting with Dr. Gero in 19, then going on to 16, 17, and 18. That kind of feels like an arc in itself. And then it goes on to the Cell arc. And this is kind of a real short arc. It's like maybe it's arbitrary for me to even put it as its own thing. But it was a really much needed way to sideline Goku to show how these other characters, how they were strong in their own right, how they could handle things themselves. I really believe this is the first kind of test we were getting to the fans' acceptance level of Goku not being the main character anymore. Because I really think Toriyama was actually thinking about sidelining Goku and letting the new generation take over. I think that was kind of what this was attesting to, and even more so in the Cell Saga. The androids were interesting characters, like the interesting foils for the rest of the characters. Between Krillin's weird, am I allowed to feel this way for 18, and 18 being 18, that kind of stuff. 17 just wanting to be a playful kid, that sort of stuff. 18 being kind of mindless, I need to defeat Goku type thing. It's like some flatness, some really cool stuff. I still think 19 and 20, like Dr. Joe and Android 19, they're totally squandered with the potential. They could have been some of the best villains, bar none, had they been given a little more time. Like, up until that point, it was the first time we saw Super Saiyan defeated. Granted, Goku was sick with his heart virus, but it also kind of feels like two arcs in one. The 18 and 19 stuff, no, the 19 and 20 stuff, and then the 16 and 17 stuff, 16, 17, 18 stuff. That stuff, they feel like two very different arcs, but they're still kind of close. So you can kind of put them to one. You can almost call this the Dr. Gero Returns arc. Even that might even make it a little better than just the Android Saga. We get the introduction to Trunks. We get that stuff, showing more people can get Super Saiyan. We get Vegeta's first real kick in the teeth. Hey, I think I'm strong because I have Super Saiyan 2, and it gets demolished by 18. So this is where we start seeing a lot of the cracks in Vegeta's armor that's going to later on lead to his ability to become Majin Vegeta and that sacrifice that he does later on. Okay, now we're going to move on to number 3. Number 3, I think, is the most foundational of the manga, of the arcs. Well, it's because it's the first one. I have Saiyan Saga at number 3. Well, Saiyan Saga just introduces a lot of concepts that later on get built on and end up taking on a much center role to the show, between the concepts of aliens and outer space and the ability to reach these places. This is really where we see Piccolo begin his redemption arc. This tells us that Goku and through Goku, Gohan are aliens or Saiyans. From there, it introduces the Saiyans like Raditz, Nappa, and Vegeta. Vegeta, who also becomes a staple later on. He's one of the most famous anime characters ever, outside of right next to Goku. So this tells us that Kami and Piccolo aren't just some demons, that they're from another planet. They're also aliens. They introduce us to the fact that the Dragon Balls are a Namekian thing. These are all things that it kind of all connects into, clicks into. That's it's all that sort of stuff. It introduces Kenkai and all that other world training, and the macroverse that is the Dragon Ball universe. It really starts introducing that, and the idea of deities being more mortal-like than what a lot of people would think. This also, starts the foreshadowing of Frieza just through the fact that we see Raditz, Snap, and Vegeta are all weary of Frieza's power, and how they're trying to collect Saiyans together to be able to rebel against him. That sort of stuff. So that's also, this is really the first time we also see the hinting at Gohan's latent power, his hidden power, through his rage and fury and stuff. This is really where you see the real first foundations of, hey, Saiyan power can be derived from their emotions. Essentially, that's kind of where that whole idea essentially starts, and I think that's a very, it's very telling of the Saiyan's nature. This is also one of the most important arcs in the series. It's very foundational for a lot of later elements, and it sets up the next arc, the Namekian arc, the Frieza saga. It sets that up very nicely, all handily. It clicks right in, and it's smooth transition into it, which I think is probably one of the best and smooth transitionings of any saga in Dragon Ball. I think that's how I feel, at least. Oh, and I didn't rank where I thought the Android Saga is. Android Saga, I would put at about a 6 out of 10. The Saiyan Saga, I'm putting that up at an 8 out of 10. Just for how foundational it is for a lot of concepts later on. Okay, now we're going to move on to number 2. This one might make a couple people angry that I have this one underneath the number 1. But number 2 is the Namekian Saga. I think the reason why I have this problem is because it's long. It feels like you could chop into a couple different arcs. The getting to Namek, the retrieving the Dragon Balls arc, and the Ginyu Saga arc, and then the Frieza arc. You could cut it up into these chunks. But maybe that's what a lot of people like, how it's so long and fleshed out. At the end of the saga, there's really no questions on the power levels of this. And it also introduces Namekian fusion. Yeah, it also shows another look at Gohan's potential, as he has a chunk of it unlocked, a chunk of that latent potential unlocked. It's got Goku and Frieza, the longest fight in all of, I would say, fiction. The 5 minutes meme, the first ever Super Saiyan transformation that changed the anime manga space. Whether you like it or not, that's something it really did. It gives you his will. Did Goku die? Did he not die? And then you get the nice little thing where you learn out, hey, people can actually refuse Shenron if they're stronger than him. So, because Goku just says, no, you're not transporting me, and I'm going to stay here. And then there's not much Shenron can do about that. It also introduces a lot of transformations. You got the Super Saiyan, you got all of Frieza's, Ginyu's change. All these sorts. There's a lot of transformations. It also introduced one of the best villains in DBZ. Frieza bar none. It's got a lot of real fun fights between Kui and Vegeta, Dodoria and Zarbon versus Vegeta. Goku Ginyu versus Vegeta, Goku versus Ginyu. Those are all real fun fights. As is kind of the real start of Vegeta's turning to being a good character, a good character, not a good person, but a good character, because that takes a lot longer. So definitely where it all starts, and I would say it's definitely good for Vegeta's character. It's good for the show. It's just kind of it's a good second arc into establishing what they wanted in DBZ, as opposed to the normal DB, and that's just kind of how that worked, and it was really fun, I think. And I would give the Namek Saga a solid 9 out of 10. And I think the reason why it's not higher on my list is just because I think it's too long. I also think they could have shaved off about an hour of that fight with Goku and Frieza, but that's besides the point. Okay, now we're gonna move on to the Cell Saga. My favorite saga is my favorite villain. It's a perfect DBZ villain, Cell, pun intended. It gives us progressions through Super Saiyan, from Super Saiyan grade 1 to grade 2, 3, and perfected Super Saiyan, and then the power above, then the Ascended Saiyan. You got Super Vegeta, all these sorts of things. Really shows Goku's aptitude for training and ascending through powers and stuff. Goku actually dies for a second time here. It's also, you get that the starting of, Piccolo's a better dad than Goku is, because he scolds Goku about Gohan being a boy when he's trying to push him to fight Cell, when it doesn't look like Gohan has a lack of a chance. And this is where we really see, and we can also see Vegeta's paternal side in here too. When Trunks gets killed by Super Heroic Cell, he freaks out, and it's a whole thing. The father son Kamehameha gets Super Perfect Cell. King Kai dying is just kind of a funny thing. It's like, oh look, gods can die. It's funny. You get the Cell games. You get the real introduction to the Room of Spirit and Time, where it's been there for a long time and no one's used it. But go up. I remember this is the thing that we could do, and it's like a real cool thing. It's like, and the whole scene where after Gohan goes Super Saiyan 2, and he just destroys all the Cell Juniors, and and with that badass uppercut making Cell expel 18 and 17. No, 18, and that's such a great moment. Goku's sacrifice. So also this is a nice little ending that departs from the norm we've seen in DBZ, where Goku saves everyone, he takes care of the final villain. But no, in this one it was actually Gohan with the help of the others and Vegeta to actually do it. And to me, the Cell Saga, I would give it a 9.5 out of 10. It's not perfect. There's some things, there's some of the jokes, some imagery a little bit there that I'm not the biggest fan of all the time, especially that chunk with Hercule and all the reporters. That I just didn't like. So that kind of knocks it down a bit. But the fighting's fantastic. Gohan's awakening of Super Saiyan 2, foreshadowed, and just the best you could do. I think it's probably the second best transformation in Dragon Ball ever. And that's just how it works. It's also one of my personal favorite transformations. Yeah, so yeah, 9.5. I hope you guys liked my rankings. If you guys have any comments, questions, and or criticisms, hit me in the comments section. If you like the video, like it. If you want to hear more of me rambling about anime, subscribe, hit the noti bell. Okay, bye.